Welcome to the DolphinsTalk.com podcast, the longest-running Miami Dolphins podcast on the internet.
We're always in control. And when you say Miami, you're talking Super Bowl. 'Cause we're the Miami Dolphins. Miami Dolphins. Miami Dolphins #1.
Hello, Miami Dolphins fans. How are you today? And thank you for listening to the DolphinsTalk.com podcast on this Tuesday, January the 20th. I'm your host, Michael Leva, joined by a very special guest today, co-founder of The Leap and host of the LockedOnPackers podcast, Peter Bukowski. Peter, how you doing today?
I'm good. Already having to do work on Packers defensive coordinator candidates because we knew this was coming. This was something that we expected, and you know, it came to pass.
Yeah, I think once John Eric Sullivan was hired, I think everyone sort of saw where this is going. And I think there's a few more things that people see that might be happening. That pipeline from Green Bay to South Florida that's now, it seems to be in full effect. And we're going to talk about all that on today's show. Real quick, shout out to the sponsor of today's show, Caneswear. Everyone go to caneswear.com for the best and most affordable Miami Dolphins apparel on the internet. Tough loss last night for the Hurricanes. If you want national championship gear, even though they didn't win, they got some national championship gear there as well. Stuff for the Marlins, the Heat, and your Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers. Caneswear.com. And if you're watching on YouTube, smash that like button and make sure you're subscribed to the channel. All right, Peter. First, let's talk about John Eric Sullivan a little bit.
Okay.
He's been with the Packers since 2003. That's a long time. He's been there for all of it, it seems like. What was the word on him around the organization? How much was he involved? Was he the right-hand man to the GM? What was kind of his role with the Packers, as best you know it?
Yeah, he was the right-hand man to Brian Gutekunst, and I think was an internal candidate when they moved on from Ted Thompson as well. And so this is someone who has been in the Packers organization a long time. If you want to find an NFL GM, you go to the Ron Wolf tree. That has just been what has been the case for, decades now. You look around the NFL, John Schneider, they're probably going to win the Super Bowl. His second as a GM. Well, he was in Green Bay. Ron Wolf actually hired Brian Gutekunst, not just like, oh, hey, a guy who hired a guy who hired. No, Ron Wolf hired Brian Gutekunst. John Eric Sullivan, you mentioned, has been in the building 20 plus years. The Packers have a way of doing things in Green Bay that is actually derived from Al Davis. That we joke about Al Davis's obsession with speed and those kinds of things, but the Packers share that. But their size speed, they're not going to draft Jacoby Ford. He's too little. They might not have drafted Devon Achane, actually, if we think about some of these things, but they have very specific thresholds when it comes to drafting. In some ways that makes it easy to pare down the pool of candidates. But they've been a very successful franchise. I don't have to tell you they've been a successful franchise over the last 20 years because they have, but the draft and development part of the franchise has really been the key because they're not the glamour market, right? They're not going to get people to come just because they want to play in South Beach. Like that's not the deal in Green Bay. And so you have to be much more judicious there. And so he's been the vice president of player personnel since 2022. Before that, he was the co-director of player personnel. And then he was in the college scouting part. The other thing that I don't want to get missed here, Mike, is this Packers staff. I think when we think about the front office job, right, we think about draft and we think about free agents. But this Packers staff, when it comes to league scouting, internal league scouting, the rest of the league, finding guys on practice squads, the Packers have been outstanding at doing that in the Brian Gutekunst era specifically. Basically, since John Eric Sullivan has been in a more elevated role, they have been Rasul Douglas, Devondre Campbell. They brought in Jared Valdir, who had to start a playoff game for them last minute. Like they've been really good. And if you look at the free agent signings that the Packers have had over the last 5 years with Brian Gutekunst, they've basically all been hits like Zadarius Smith, Preston Smith, Billy Turner, Adrian Amos, Xavier McKinney, Josh Jacobs. They don't go in often, but when they pay someone a lot of money, they're usually right. And that is just not the case in free agency where the NFL as a whole bats less than 50-50 on these free agents. So I think this is an outstanding hire by the Miami Dolphins. I think Dolphins fans should be really, really excited about John Eric Sullivan. And you're right. Once he went to Miami, it felt sort of written in the stars that Jeff Hafley was going to be the guy he'd bring with him.
Yeah, he did an interview with the in-house social media team of the Dolphins, John Eric Sullivan, and a lot of what he said is kind of what you said, in that they look for certain traits, and that he goes, which is a line that caught everyone's attention, because with Mike McDaniel, speed, 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 size was not like an issue. He goes, fast gets slow, big won't get small. And I think it was like Dolphins fans just like sunlight. It was like hearing angels. It's like, yeah, we can't have a team full of just little fast guys. You got to have some guys with some size, because then when we go up north and play teams like the Ravens or the Bills or the Patriots, we get our doors blown
Chiefs.
too small. And it's like you got to have some, beef essentially.
Well,
So
wait. So did he say that in a Dolphins interview?
yes, he's
Because that's a JES line, because he has said that in multiple interviews over the years with the Packers draft. This is an
Really?
ethos for him. Big don't get small. It is like a running bit between me and some of my Packers media friends. Like, we say that all the time. And if you look at their first round picks, and I know they haven't all been,
No.
home runs. Rashawn Gary, 6'5", 275. Lucas Van Ness, 6'5", 275. They when they want pass rushers, they want big, but they want elite athletic tools. If you look at in the Brian Gutekunst era, where John Eric Sullivan again has been in that elevated role, their first round pick has had a relative athletic score over 9 basically every single year, and that includes Jordan Love. They prioritize athleticism, but the thing about relative athletic score is it includes the size component. So if you're little and you're really athletic, it's going to ding you for that. They want big dudes in the first round. Here's another little thing that I think is important, and I would assume Sullivan is going to bring this ethos to him, and I think this is also going to be manna from heaven for Dolphins fans. This team has been outstanding drafting offensive linemen, and one of the reasons is they're not just big, strong, fast when it comes to offensive line. They want guys who can potentially play multiple positions. So they actually don't like tall offensive linemen, because they want you, if you're not a great tackle, to play guard. Think about Josh Sitton, collegiate tackle, who they moved to guard. TJ Lang, collegiate tackle that they moved to guard. Elton Jenkins was a center that they moved to guard. The positional versatility thing is going to be huge on this team, because they don't want to feel like you are locked into one spot unless you're a center. And the Dolphins don't have that problem, because they've got one of the best centers in the NFL. So they're not going to be looking for a center anytime soon. So that's something that I think, the Dolphins have really struggled finding those cornerstone pieces.
Oh, the offensive line has been so bad
line.
for many years. The offensive line in Miami has always been a struggle. It's the one area we can't get right. And they've invested so many picks in the offensive line, from Liam Eichenberg, where they traded a third-round pick to move up in round 2 to get him. Last year, Jonah Savayanea, they traded like 3 picks to move up in round 2 to get him. And, it was a rough rookie year for Jonah.
Yeah.
And Austin Jackson was a first-round pick, always hurt, never on the field. And then there's some other guys who just didn't even work out. They've invested so many picks. It's just the offensive line is going to be one of the things he has to fix early in his time. There's a lot to fix, so I'm not going to say it's the top thing to fix, but it's going to be near the top of the list and top 5 things to fix, because the offensive line has been a disaster in Miami.
Yeah, and I think that, when you look at the Packers over the years, I mean, David Bakhtiari, 4th round pick, Zach Tom, 4th round pick, like they're also able to find these gems, because Josh Norris at Underdog Fantasy did a study about offensive linemen and the hit rate for guys who have a short shuttle. I forget exactly what the cutoff point is, but the guys who have short shuttles that are faster than a certain point, they hit at a rate well above the average offensive lineman rate. And no one drafts more of those players over the last 10 years than the Green Bay Packers. So they from a process standpoint, they do a lot of this right. Even when the players don't turn out to be outstanding players, the process is good. And, I think that's an important thing when you're talking about a front office. You want them, you're not, this is, if you're in the front office, it's like baseball. Like, if you've got a 350 batting average, you're a good GM in the draft. Like, the draft is hard. And the difference between a good GM is 350 and a bad GM is like 270. Like, it's not that big a difference, but it's like baseball, where like the difference in hitting is that small a margin. And that could be the difference between one quality starter. That is the difference in a football game. One quality starter on the offensive line can make a world of difference. So I think that's a really important piece here, but you got to get the quarterback part of this right. And no team over the last 30 years has gotten the
better
position right more often than the Green Bay Packers, both in player acquisition and in the draft. And so if you want a short-term stopgap option, look, I think you can do a lot worse than Malik Willis. I don't know if the money is going to work. I think he's going to get a lot of money on the open market. With Tua, I haven't looked at the cap sheet in Miami.
He's done. I don't care how much it costs. He's done. There's no is 0%
and I think you're right.
Back.
The question is going to be the appetite from someone like Stephen Ross to say we're gonna eat that contract, understanding it was bad, while also taking this risk on a relatively unproven guy. Because, by the way, they're not bringing Matt LaFleur with them. Now, we don't know what Jeff Hafley's staff is going to look like if he brings Adam Stenavich and Ryan Mahaffey and some of the other guys from the Green Bay staff. I think you have a much better chance of getting what you got from Malik Willis in Green Bay. But I mean, Malik Willis looked unplayable in Tennessee, and in Green Bay, among guys who have at least as many attempts as him, he's the most efficient quarterback in the NFL since he came to Green Bay. It's like that. That's not hyperbole. Like by EPA per play and those kinds of things. Like he's been outstanding for the Packers in limited reps. I do think with more reps, like I said this 6 weeks ago, probably, just the thought. This was before John Eric Sullivan. This was before Jeff Hafley. I said the thought of Malik Willis in an offense with Devon Achane and Jalen Waddle is tantalizing, because Malik Willis immediately becomes one of the fastest quarterbacks in the league, one of the most dynamic quarterbacks in the league. With those guys running any version of, a spread out offense, like interestingly, I think in a Mike McDaniel offense, that would have been great. But you get a version of the Mike McDaniel offense in Green Bay with Jeff Hafley. I'm assuming if they're going to run some of the Matt LaFleur stuff that they did in Green Bay. And why wouldn't you? He was so good at it.
Yeah, I think when it comes to Ross, I have followed this man since he was here in 2008 when he bought the team. He won't get involved in that. Because when it comes to money, first off, he's like 83 and he's got so much money. Not that he doesn't care, because when you talk about that much money, you always care. But I don't think he'll get involved to be like, no, we're not going to make that move. So I think if they want to move, because they're going to cut him pre-June 1st, eat $99 million, or they'll probably do it post-June 1st, take $67 million this year, the rest next year. That's roughly, those aren't maybe exact numbers, but those are like rough ballpark numbers. I think that's probably what they're going to do. They're also going to cut Hill, and they're going to get some money there. They're also going to cut Chubb. They're going to get some money there because their contracts go crazy numbers next year. And also, Minkah Fitzpatrick has no guaranteed money. I think he might be gone too to open up money. So it's going to help offset that. But there's also ways for them to make a play for someone like Willis should they want to. And I think what it'll come down to is he going to want like a 5-year deal or a 4-year deal? Then I think Miami's out. They want him for 2 to 3 years stopgap, because in this draft, round 1, they're pick number 11. Not going to be a quarterback there. Maybe in the mid to late rounds, they find someone cool, but that's always a roll of the dice. 2027 draft, we know, is loaded with quarterbacks. That's when they're probably going to find their quarterback. So Willis, if they can get him at a fair price, short-term deal, I think they're all in. And I'd be shocked if it doesn't happen. Honestly, I really would be shocked. I think that's probably what's going to happen.
Yeah, and I would say he's not the only one that I think John Eric Sullivan would be interested in bringing with him from Green Bay. I think Quay Walker is going to be a free agent. He was someone that the Packers were really, really, really high on in the draft. I don't think he's going to get that top of market sort of linebacker deal. Spotrac has his market value estimated in that $9.6 million range. That's someone that I think they could have interest in. And Sean Ryan is another one, offensive lineman. He was a top 100 pick for the Packers. Never quite found the right home for him. He was very good in 2024 as the right guard. Was not nearly as good in 2025 as the right guard, but then was very solid as the center. Seemed to be settling in there at center. That could make some sense for the Dolphins. Romeo Doubs, I think, as like they internally in Green Bay, they think very highly of Romeo Doubs. I just think his market is going to be such that they're not going to be able to do that. I think the Savion Williams, Matthew Golden draft picks last year tells you that they did not think both of Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson are going to be back, and they already extended Christian Watson. So Romeo Doubs is someone who I think he would be a very good complement as a possession receiver next to Jalen Waddle, who can take the top off the defense. It becomes very much like the Doubs-Watson pairing. And Romeo Doubs in the red zone is a guy who, is going to be able to make contested catches. He's kind of like a supercharged version of someone like Kendrick Bourne. These guys who are just really savvy players, really reliable players. I think that Doubs is a name that I haven't seen linked to Miami very often, but given some of their needs, I think that would make a lot of sense.
Wide receiver is going to be a huge need because Hill won't be here. I also think he might get suspended too, because he's got some off the field stuff going on that's beyond crazy. So, but plus with the money, it just skyrockets next year. He was going to be gone anyways. And outside of Waddle, they really don't have much at wide receiver. They got
Right.
Malik Washington, who's okay as like a number 4, maybe even a number 3, but that's his limit. They need help at wide receiver, so that wouldn't shock me there either. He did say too in that interview, he wants to have the way that things were run with the Packers in Miami, so that's still here long after he's gone. He wants to install that so it just stays here, which is nice to hear. In reality, who knows? That's a big goal, I would say. But also in free agency, he wants to be intentional with who he signs and he doesn't want to sign mercenaries because you can't win when you have a team full of mercenaries. Obviously, signing guys from the Packers, he knows them. He knows their standard. He knows what they are. So I could see a lot like stuff like that happen for sure. Some of those names you mentioned, I think they're all going to be in play because here's the deal with Miami. We got needs everywhere. This roster's got a few guys that you would say very good players. Outside of that, there is needs literally tight end, wide receiver, offensive line. Quarterback's a big need. Secondary is a disaster. Edge rusher, Chop Robinson, nobody else. And he wasn't even that great this year. They got needs in a lot of areas. So pretty much, I think as many guys from the Packers that he likes that can come, I think probably we're going to see probably at least a handful. Let's talk Jeff Hafley.
Okay.
Packers coordinator for 2 seasons. I know 2024, they were ranked like top 5 in most of the categories. This past year, they had some guys hurt, still ranked just outside the top 10. What's your thoughts on Jeff Hafley and his time with the Packers?
I have to tell you, when the Packers hired him, he was not the name everyone in Green Bay wanted. And so Packer fans are familiar with the feeling that I know a lot of Dolphins fans have. Like, how are we supposed to get excited about this guy? And then I started talking to people, and I started talking to people close to Boston College. I started digging into some of the interviews, finding things that he's said. He gave an excellent interview with Adam Brennan, who is, I would encourage you to go find. I will send you a link. I did a narrative podcast. I was so taken with Jeff Hafley. The more I started to dig into him, I did a narrative podcast, which is not what I do, about him, because I just wanted to let him tell the story. I wanted to let him explain what his ethos was. And what I found was he is so capable as a communicator. And you just have to have that as a coach in the NFL. You have to be able to communicate the why, and then you have to be malleable and adaptive. The Packers in 2024 came into that season going, we can rush with 4. We can rush with 4, and then we can just do whatever we want on the back end. Disguise coverages. Evan Williams, the Packers safety, who's really becoming a star for Green Bay, came on LockedOnPackers a number of times his rookie season. It was like the goal was to be the most disguised defense in the NFL. Now, in a world where Brian Flores exists, I don't know that you could quite get there, but they did a lot of disguise, and Xavier McKinney was an all-pro, and Evan Williams was outstanding. What happened in 2024 was Edgerrin Cooper, as a rookie, had to start. Javon Bullard, as a rookie, was going to be their day 1 starter at safety. He played nickel and safety at Georgia. Jair Alexander could not stay on the field. So they moved Keyshawn Nixon from the nickel to the outside, where he had never played in the NFL. And he turned into a fine starter for them. And they were able to put together a top 10 defense with a group of players that, if you look at them, you go, this is not that talented a defense. It's really not. And I know that people want to talk about the turnovers. They were top 10 in EPA per play in 2024 without turnovers. Just take the turnovers out. And so the turnovers count. Ask the Chicago Bears, right? They can help you win games, but they were good down to down too. And it was because of the disguise that they were able to create. They played Brian Flores in week 4, I think it was. And they're like, hey, all that simulated pressure and double A gap mug stuff that they're doing, why don't we just borrow that? And all of the single high that Jeff Hafley wanted to play, well, they couldn't protect their corners well enough. Their corners weren't good enough to hold up out there. So they're like, well, we got to play much more cover 2, cloud sides more. And so the adaptation was really impressive to me. And then you add a Micah Parsons, 4.5 minutes before the season starts, and immediately he's having an impact on games. And yeah, he's Micah Parsons, but I'm talking about they had packages for him right away with like this is such a perfect encapsulation of Jeff Hafley. So they get Micah Parsons a week before the season starts, right? The very first snap Micah Parsons plays, he's lined up to Jared Goff's right with Lucas Van Ness standing up. I mentioned 6'5", 275, Edrin Cooper, the inside linebacker, standing up, and Micah Parsons standing up. You got to sort it out. Panay Sewell, you got to figure it out. And they didn't, and they created a pressure, and they got off the field on the very first play, and the crowd pop. Man, the crowd pop. I just have to tell you, the crowd pop when Micah Parsons ran out on the field was unbelievable. But they I think over the course of the season, they realized the corner situation was worse than they thought. The defensive tackle situation ended up being worse than they thought. Devontae Wyatt got hurt. So the numbers are not going to look as good last year as you would think they would. But at their best, I mean, Jalen Hurts, they'd played the Broncos 2 or 3 weeks before they played the Packers in the middle of last year, this 2025 season. And Jalen Hurts said after the game, that's the best defense we've seen. That might be the best defense in the NFL. And so their high-end ability and their ability to game plan effectively is a credit to Jeff Hafley. Like, they went in a playoff game against Philly where they were almost touchdown underdogs without a bunch of key offensive starters and without a defensive front that can affect the passer in a meaningful way on their own. And they stymied Jalen Hurts and that offense. And I know in retrospect, you go, come on, everyone stymied that offense at one point or another. But that team blew through the postseason. I mean, no one could get stops against that Eagles offense in the postseason. And the Packers did it. And they did it by just being on everything. Like, I asked Evan Williams, how did you guys do that? And he said, like, we just felt like we knew everything that they were going to call when they were going to call it. Well, that's game planning. That's coaching. That's the job of the coach. And so I think Jeff Hafley is going to be, an even better head coach because he gets to take that adaptability, that malleability, and oversee everything. And I think he is just so well suited to that sort of scenario. Plus, I mentioned A+ communicator. So you're getting a guy right away that I think he's going to win the press conference day one. And I think he's going to win Dolphins fans over early.
Well, he can't be worse than the last guy we had at press conferences with the ums and the ahs every 2 seconds. I mean, it's cute when you're winning. When you start losing, it's like, dude, just cut through the crap and just tell me an answer. It's like there comes a point where it's like a little much. But no, I was the same way, because when we first had this whole process start, and I knew Hafley was a name who was going to be out there, just because it's been out there for a year. This guy's ready to be a head coach, and who's going to be the team to sort of hop on him. And I did some research, and because up here, I go to all the games here at Syracuse. I remember him from his time at Boston College. And there was a few times, I know at Syracuse, we're not a great program. Boston College would come here and kind of wipe the floor. But what the hell's going on here? It's Boston College. They're like equals to us. It's because of him. He was the head coach those years. And, there people just look at the record. They don't understand the limitations you have at a school like Boston College when it comes to NIL, facility, recruiting base. Like, we see it up here where I live in Syracuse. You know about that. You're a Syracuse guy. They got it maybe even a little bit worse than us. Yeah. So what he did there, he said this. He said this in an interview, in multiple interviews. He just wants to coach. Like, that's why he left college, is because he missed coaching football. Part of being a head coach in college is you got to recruit. And then with NIL and the transfer portal now, you got to recruit twice or 3 times, where it's like, okay, I get a guy. I hit on a diamond in the rough at Boston College. Well, as soon as I do that, guess who's calling? Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia. And you got it. Now you have to do it again. You got to recruit. Hey, the best thing for you is to stay here. And these players are going, and rightfully so. Well, pay up then, because these other programs are going to do it. They're going to pay for talent. And so he just didn't want to do that anymore. In the NFL, that is part of the deal, right? Like, free agents is part of the deal, and you're going to have contracts. At least the guy, he's going to be there,
right? You sign him to a 4-year deal. You have them for, if you want all 4 of those years, you have them for all 4 of those years. So, I think he is very well suited to the NFL game. And this is, remember, a guy who spent plenty of time in the NFL, was on the Mike Pettin staff in Cleveland. Which, if you go back and look, Tony Grossi who covers the Browns. Yeah. Put out the Mike Pettin staff that one year. It's Kyle Shanahan, Aaron Glenn, Jeff Hafley, Anthony Weaver, Bobby Babbage, Mike McDaniel, Mike LaFleur, and Chris Tabor. Like,
how'd they lose?
Well, and that was 2014, right? So that's Johnny Manziel. That's it was that team wasn't very good, but that is an A+ coaching staff. And the other thing that I think is important here is when he put together his initial staff in Green Bay, he did an excellent job of finding position coaches. And Derek Ainsley is going to have a chance to be a defensive coordinator in this cycle. Might be the defensive coordinator for the Miami Dolphins. They brought in Anthony Campanile, who is a Dolphins coach. Well, he goes to Jacksonville, and they have one of the best seasons in Jacksonville defensive recent memory since Jalen Ramsey was in Jacksonville. Yeah. And he's now getting head coach looks. They bring in DeMarcus Covington, and Lucas Van Ness takes a step forward. And so like you look at the way that he has been able to find and identify talent in the coaching ranks. That's such a key piece. Like, especially when you're a defensive coach, you have to be able to turn over your staff because it's going to get poached. Like, if he brings in a good offensive coordinator and you have success, he's going to get an opportunity, and then Jeff Hafley is going to have to replace him. And not every defensive coach is adept at doing that. We've seen, Mike Tomlin struggle with that for years in Pittsburgh. We've seen John Harbaugh, who's not a defensive coach, but is a CEO coach, struggle, is it Cam Cameron? Is it Jim Caldwell? Is it, Greg Roman? Is it Todd Monken? You have to be able to identify talent, and it's going to be really hard to keep those guys year over year. Jeff Hafley has a huge Rolodex in the NFL. Close with Kyle Shanahan, close with Robert Saleh, close with now Matt LaFleur. He's got excellent access to a long list of coaches. I wouldn't be surprised if now I'm going to blank on his name, but the quarterback's coach in Dallas was his offensive, was his offensive coordinator at Boston College. And so I wouldn't be surprised to see him on this Miami Dolphins staff at all.
Yeah. That's a name that's sort of been floating around here the past 24 hours in Miami, thinking that something there might happen. And also there's a linebackers coach with Jacksonville who coached with him when he was in college there as a head coach at Boston College. So there's a few names out there people are starting to tie together. And then, of course, there's some guys on the Packers staff. Last question, I'll let you go. Your Packers, rough end of the season, brutal last game. I mean, they were right there. Just where are they going from here now? You think? What's the next step for them? And how are they sort of positioned next year with the roster? Are they going to lose a few guys or like key guys, I should say? Or how do you see them heading into next year?
I think they're going to be really good next year. You're only going to be as good in any given season as your best players are going to take you. Well, you lose Micah Parsons, you lose Tucker Kraft, who is on his way to having an all-pro type season, and you lose Zach Tom, your best offensive lineman, and you still really should have beat the 2 seed in the NFC, 25 fourth quarter points. And I know that if you're a Dolphins fan, you're going, yeah, well, Jeff Hafley's the defensive coordinator. Like, that's part of the deal. Okay. You lose Micah Parsons in that game. You're not playing with Devontae Wyatt, your best defensive lineman. And you're not playing with Edgerrin Cooper, who was flying around in that game. They were kicking the Bears' ass in the first half of that game, in part because Edgerrin Cooper was playing with his hair on fire, and Edgerrin Cooper goes down in that game. At a certain point, you just have to have the bodies, and the Packers just didn't have there's a point where you reach critical mass, and I think the Packers had gotten to that point. There is something Micah Parsons talked about that I don't think is necessarily a reflection of Jeff Hafley. There was in the early season an attitude about this team, this Packers team on defense especially. They were flying to the ball, swarming. They're so fast. They lost that at times. They did not always play as engaged and as interested as you would like them to. But I don't think you can coach effort. I think that guys have to be internally motivated. And the Packers were not always internally motivated. It's one of the reasons why some Packer fans were interested in Matt LaFleur not being the coach anymore. But I will tell you, a lot of those fans that wanted Matt LaFleur fired wanted Jeff Hafley promoted. They wanted the Packers to fire Matt LaFleur so they could promote Jeff Hafley. So Hafley was seen as the solution to the problem, not the source of the problems.
Wow. Yeah, that's something there. Because I have liked Hafley. I know fans are fans on social media, and they're always the most vocal, the most sometimes outrageous. A lot of fans of Dolphins are like first-time head coach, because we haven't had a head coach with NFL head coaching experience since Wanstad. You're going back to the year 2000. It's been first-time head coach who's come here. They all say the things and they fail. I've said Chris Greer's not picking this one, though. We have some new people in charge, and you got to give them a chance. And I think we might have hit on the right one. I don't know. I'm hopeful. I mean, you never really know. But I think just having guys from the Packers, that Packers way, is just a new approach for Miami. And I have optimism that I don't know I had 3 to 4 weeks ago when this whole process started for GM and head coach. Troy Aikman seems like he was on board with both these guys and was very, very, very huge fans of them. And he was part of this process. So we'll see. Peter, thank you so much. Tell everyone where they can find your work, where they can listen to you, and all that good stuff.
Yeah, Locked On Packers is the podcast. I'll send you the Jeff Hafley narrative pod so that you can put
please.
it out to your fans as well. The Leap is the newsletter. We put that out 3 days a week in the off season, 5 days a week during the regular season. Yeah, that's me.
Awesome. Peter, thank you so much for a few moments of your time. Everyone have a great day, and we'll talk to you again after a while.